The marble lobby of Meridian Tower gleamed under crystalline lights as Marcus Webb approached the brass-handled glass doors, delivery bags slung across his chest, wearing the blue uniform of Metro Express Delivery. For a split second, the space felt welcoming. Soaring ceilings, polished floors, the kind of architectural grandeur that whispered money and exclusivity. Then Patricia Morrison stepped directly into his path, her hand raised like a stop sign, her eyes scanning him with a practiced assessment of someone who had perfected the art deciding who belonged. "You can't come through here," she said, her voice sharp as a knife's edge. "Service entrance is in the back. Around the corner, down the alley. We have standards." That word again. Standards. As if his presence violated something fundamental about the space itself. Marcus had heard some version of this before. The second glances, the assumptions, the invisible walls that materialized whenever he entered spaces people like him supposedly didn't belong in. But something about the way Patricia said it, the contempt wrapped in politeness, the way she physically blocked him as if his body was a threat, ignited something deeper than usual frustration. He set down his delivery bag slowly, deliberately, meeting her eyes. "I need to show you something," he said quietly, "because I'm tired of this, and because someone needs to understand what they're actually doing when they do it." Patricia's face twisted with annoyance. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the truth exploded between them like a grenade neither of them saw coming. And in the next 60 seconds, her entire understanding of who stood before her would shatter completely, along with the invisible authority she thought she possessed. Marcus Augustus Webb was a man who believed in understanding systems from the inside. At 34 years old, he built a successful tech consulting business, one that had made him wealthy enough to purchase the penthouse of Meridian Tower 2 years ago. Not rented, owned. The deed was registered under his name, the mortgage paid through a trust, the property taxes handled meticulously by his legal team. Unit 5201, 52 floors up, $2 million of sanctuary with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a skyline he'd earned the right to see. But nobody in this building knew that. Not the staff who passed him in hallways. Not the residents who sometimes shared elevators. Not Patricia Morrison, who had worked here 8 years and had perfected the art of invisible gatekeeping, the subtle art of making people feel unwelcome in spaces that were supposed to be open to everyone who paid the price of entry. What they saw was a uniform. What they saw was a brown man carrying packages. What they saw was a category, not a person. Someone who existed to serve but not to belong. Someone who had a function but no place. And Marcus had learned something crucial from working as a delivery driver 3 days a week despite his wealth. This invisibility, this dismissal, this was not accidental. It was systematic. It was learned. It was taught. He worked deliveries not because he needed money. He did it to remember, to understand, to witness how systems actually function when they thought no one important was watching. Every dismissive glance, every redirected path, every not here, not now, not you, these were data points in a larger pattern, and he refused to ignore the pattern anymore. "I understand your protocols," Marcus said, his voice level and calm. "I also understand exactly what you meant when you said that, and I want to show you something very specific." Patricia rolled her eyes dramatically. "I don't have time for building security," she suddenly called out, her voice shrill with a panic that felt performative, protective. Her fear was strategic. Her fear was a shield that systemic racism had learned to deploy when cornered by someone who wouldn't accept invisibility. 2 security guards appeared within 30 seconds. Marcus recognized them both, James, who sometimes held the elevator door and made small talk about weather, and Kevin, who always looked uncomfortable in the presence of someone like Marcus, someone who didn't fit the narrative he'd been taught to expect. "This man is trying to access the front entrance," Patricia announced, positioning herself between Marcus and the elevators like a human barrier, like his very presence was contagion. "He's delivery service. He's been told to use the service entrance. He's refusing to comply." Marcus stood perfectly still. He was used to this moment, the moment when his humanity became negotiable based on someone's perception of his function, the moment when explaining himself felt like begging for permission to exist. But he was done begging. "I'm going to show you all something," he said, his voice cutting through the lobby quiet like a blade. Because what's happening right now, this moment, this is exactly what needs to stop. He pulled out his phone, scrolled deliberately, and held it up. The screen glowed bright. This is a property deed, registered with the city. This building, Penthouse Suite, Unit 5201. He looked directly at Patricia, then at James and Kevin. It's registered under my name, Marcus Augustus Webb. I purchased this unit 2 years ago. I live here. I own this building's most expensive residential space. The silence was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens when someone's entire worldview realigns in a single moment. Patricia's face drained of color, not gradually, but completely, as if someone had pulled a plug. That can't. She started, her voice barely a whisper. You're just delivery. No, Marcus said quietly, and now his voice carried a weight that came from 2 years of being invisible in a space he owned. I'm a homeowner. I'm a resident. I'm an owner. And I'm tired of explaining that to people who refuse to see it unless I prove it with a document. James shifted uncomfortably. Kevin looked at his shoes as if they'd suddenly become fascinating. I work as a delivery driver 3 days a week, Marcus continued, still calm but with an edge that cut deeper than any raised voice could achieve. I do it intentionally, to understand how systems work from the ground up, to stay connected to real work, to remember that my money doesn't make me better than anyone else. He paused, letting the silence accumulate weight. But you know what I've learned from doing this? I've learned that there are people, a lot of people, who believe that a uniform determines a person's worth, who believe that how someone looks determines where they belong, who believe that their comfort in a space is more important than someone else's dignity. Patricia tried to speak. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water, gasping for oxygen in an environment that no longer supported her. I could have let this go, Marcus said, and his voice now carried the weight of every dismissal, every assumption, every moment he'd chosen silence. I could have used the back entrance. I could have accepted the framework you try to put me in. But if I do that, nothing changes. If I stay silent, the next person who comes through in a uniform gets the same treatment. The next person gets told they don't belong in their own building. The next person gets made to feel less than human because of what someone sees when they look at them. The phone screen still showed the deed, undeniable proof glowing in the lobby light. So here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, his voice final and undeniable. James is going to escort me to Unit 5201. Kevin is going to document this incident. And Patricia is going to understand that this building has policies about discrimination, and she's violated every single one of them. Patricia's face crumpled. She looked like she wanted to argue, wanted to find some technicality that would save her authority. But the deed on the screen was irrefutable. Resistance would only make it worse. As Marcus walked toward the elevators with James, the security guard whispered urgently, "Man, I didn't know. I'm sorry." "I know you didn't know," Marcus said, not unkindly. "But now you do. That's what matters. Now you have to decide what you do with that knowledge." The elevator doors closed, sealing 52 floors of vertical distance between Marcus and the lobby below, between the moment of violation and the moment of reckoning. He looked out at the city spreading below him like a kingdom he'd earned but was never supposed to occupy, and he understood something fundamental. The deed in his pocket wasn't what gave him power. His refusal to accept the framework that tried to diminish him, that was the real power. That was what actually changed things. By late afternoon, the incident had rippled through Meridian Tower, like an earthquake registering on every resident's consciousness. Word spread quickly in a way that complicated truths do in closed spaces, through whispered conversations in hallways, through elevator discussions cut short when management entered, through the dawning realization that someone they'd passed 100 times, someone they perhaps nodded at or pointedly ignored, was not what they'd assumed. He was not help. He was not temporary. He was not less than. He was an owner, an equal in the most literal sense, someone whose name appeared on a deed alongside theirs. Patricia Morrison was called into the building manager's office at 3:47 p.m. The conversation lasted 14 minutes. By the end of it, She'd offered a formal written apology to Marcus, agreed to attend mandatory discrimination training, and accepted a 30-day suspension pending a full review of her conduct and management approach. The building issued a statement about its commitment to ensuring all residents and visitors, regardless of appearance or occupation, were treated with dignity and respect. It was corporate language, the kind of thing companies deployed after they got caught. But it was also documentation. It was institutional acknowledgement that something wrong had happened. Marcus received calls from residents, some apologetic, some defensive, some curious. He took them all, answered honestly, and refused to pretend the incident wasn't significant. But the moment that mattered most came the next evening, when a young black woman named Sophia Chan, a civil rights attorney who lived on the 31st floor, stopped him in the lobby. She was impeccably dressed in a navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase that spoke of power and professional accomplishment. "I heard what happened," she said, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of emotion. "With Patricia, I want you to know something. I've been living here for 3 years, and I've experienced similar things. Not as dramatically, but the looks, the questions, the invisible gatekeeping. I just accepted it as the price of being here. I told myself that if I was quiet enough, professional enough, invisible enough in the right ways, I wouldn't trigger those reactions." Marcus listened, understanding the weight of what she was saying. "Watching you stand firm instead of disappearing," Sophia continued, and now her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "It reminded me that I shouldn't have to accept it, that my presence here doesn't need anyone's permission or validation, that I own my space, literally and figuratively, and I don't have to apologize for it." She paused, gathering herself. "Thank you for not staying silent. Thank you for making me realize I don't have to either." It was the kind of thank you that mattered more than any apology from Patricia could have. It was a kind of thank you that transformed a personal injury into something larger, a crack in a system that had been carefully constructed to make certain people feel like they never quite belonged, no matter what they achieved or purchased or owned. Sophia told him that she was already preparing a letter to building management about establishing formal diversity and inclusion protocols. She mentioned that other residents had reached out to her, wanting to support institutional changes. She spoke about using her legal expertise to ensure the building's policies actually protected people instead of just appearing to. "This place needed someone like you to wake up to what was actually happening," she said. "And maybe now it can actually change." Later that night, Marcus stood on his penthouse balcony, looking out at the city that had tried to tell him his place in it, and he understood something that no amount of wealth could buy you directly. The real power wasn't in ownership. The real power was in refusal. Refusal to accept diminishment. Refusal to pretend the pattern wasn't real. Refusal to let a single moment of systemic disrespect pass without witness and response. He thought about Patricia going home that evening, her authority stripped away, her understanding of herself reorganized in a single afternoon. He thought about James and Kevin making new choices about what they would accept or challenge in their daily work. He thought about Sophia recognizing her own power and beginning to use it. He thought about all the small ripples that would expand from this single moment of someone refusing to disappear. The penthouse was his, but more importantly, his presence was his, and he would never again accept a framework that said it wasn't. If you've ever been made to feel unwelcome in a space you had every right to occupy, if you've ever been invisible in a place you belonged, if you've ever chosen silence when speaking would cost you, hit that like button, subscribe to Story Arc, because standing up to systemic racism isn't just personal, it's revolutionary. And every single time someone refuses to accept the invisible cage that systems build, the entire structure weakens. Change happens when we stop accepting the framework that tries to diminish us.